tuning in to Casual Conversations, the podcast with Tony and Dylan. Today's gonna be episode 0 is what we're recording. Episode 0, the Prologue. It's gonna be just us talking about how we came to the idea of making a podcast and what this podcast is gonna be about. So yeah, let's get started. I'm Tony, and this is really awkward.
Yeah.
Because I'm talking to imaginary people for the first time. Well, actually not the first time in my life, but still. This episode's gonna be just mostly about who we are and how we came to meet each other and how we decided to start a podcast, even though neither of us have done this before. And then we're gonna talk about like what this podcast really means to us and what we would like to get out of the podcast and what we'd like people to get from our podcast. And yeah, that should round out the episode pretty nicely. I guess I'll kick things off and get started. So, I'm Tony, and this makes it feel like I'm like making a dating profile. I'm like, I'm Tony, I like long walks on the beach and poems. No, but I felt like I wanted to start a podcast just because I've always been a big fan of podcasts in general, even though I have never podcasted in my life. And I've always really liked listening to podcasts because they're just people talking about something they're passionate about. Like, it doesn't really matter what, but I can sit there and just listen to people talk about something they love for hours and hours, and just the amount of depth people could get into about their passions is just something that I always am interested in listening to. And often, like, I find myself in these huge rants, and I was like, I feel like I could do a podcast. Yeah, like, what's your relationship with podcasts like, Dylan?
Yeah, I've always been kind of interested in podcasts for a lot of the same reasons. Like you said, one of the things I like about a lot of them is that they're, just everyday folks kind of making something and talking about things that they're interested in. They don't necessarily have to be these people who are specialized or like professionals in a certain area. They're just kind of some people in a bedroom making something and sharing their ideas, which I think in today's age is especially important. We all kind of need to be talking and sharing our own views and listening to other people's views. So, yeah, I don't know. Guess I'm just kind of interested in talking and hashing out different things.
Yeah, honestly, that like leads pretty well into a topic that I was going to talk about for later, but makes sense now. The title of the podcast, Casual Conversations, is I also am a very big believer of that idea of people don't need to be experts to be passionate about something. Yeah, I think you put it really nicely in that, like, people should just talk about things that are important to them, and you don't need a degree or any knowledge of it. Obviously is good, but honestly, it's should be everyone talking about things, and that's like what the podcast name has come to really mean to me. It's casual conversations kind of by casual people.
I know we already set up and stuff and started, but like if we had it so we're like facing each
Kind
other.
of, yeah, and not just talking
Just like
next to each other. Well, this whole part will get cut out. So yeah, I guess we talked about us a little bit. Let's talk about individually, like, what do you see yourself getting out of the podcast?
I guess something that you mentioned before is just kind of hashing out your own ideas. Especially, I'm kind of interested in hashing out ideas verbally to an audience or not, or like just to your friends, because I think that we're obviously very consumed in social media and stuff where it's easier to take the time to like think out what you're gonna say and type it in just the right way and whatever, and I think there's something to actually speaking and really processing things in real time, and not just speaking but listening to others. You just kind of have that one moment to process what that person is saying, and whatever ideas that conjures up is like kind of spontaneous. So I'm interested in that. I'm also interested in kind of starting hopefully what will be an ongoing conversation with you and I, which our conversations have been ongoing, but even with potentially other people
who, whether it's like friends or family, and we don't always have the time to hang out with them.
Yeah.
But...
and maybe don't share like the same beliefs, but especially now, it's just important to get out of the echo chamber and really start having conversations. And I guess something I also am interested in with this podcast is kind of documenting my own growth as far as ideas go, because while I have my own views and I'm certainly set in my own ways on a lot of things, I also change my opinion and come to different understandings, and I think it would be cool just to really see the growth in that.
I definitely resonate with a lot of the stuff you said. I find myself getting a deeper understanding of things through our conversations, and yeah, I completely agree that it's definitely needed. A lot of times I think the interesting thing is it's like, that's why these casual conversations are good to me, is because sometimes I'm just interested in a topic that I don't know a lot about. Sometimes it's like you do have a lot more information than I do, and it ends up helping me learn a lot. Even when you don't, we end up looking more into it and both end up getting a better understanding of the topic. I think trying to have a podcast show, trying to figure out like, hey, what do I want to talk about? What themes do I want to cover in this episode? And would honestly help me be way less tangenty of a person when I talk, like speech ADHD, and I hop around on topics way too much. So I guess another really big point of personal growth is I just want to be better at conversating. I find I learn so much more when I just shut up and let other people talk. And podcasting definitely helps me be like, wait, Dylan definitely needs more time to speak than this, and I should just shut up for a bit. And yeah, the whole bit about breaking echo chambers is a really big part of this too. Whether it's like a miniature echo chamber, like I know, especially in the media and how we use it now, echo chamber really refers to a group, and a lot of people use it to refer to it as like social media and stuff. But honestly, like, it comes down to being stubborn too. It's like your own brain could be an echo chamber in itself, because you're just reinforcing your own ideas unless you hear something different that changes your mind on things. So whether it's breaking a smaller or a bigger echo chamber, it's always useful just to connect to some different people, I guess.
Yeah.
I find myself with these like deeper conversations we have, that like I get a lot of growth out of it, and I find that I get the most growth when I talk to you specifically than like just any other people. It just so happens to be the way that we hash, the back and forth we have, and I think it's both of us, although we don't always see eye to eye on everything, we both definitely have like an open-mindedness to at least like listen to each other's opinions. And even though sometimes I'm like, I find out later that I'm like factually wrong, but I feel like you just never make me actually feel like I'm just like incorrect for thinking or feeling about a certain way. Which leads me into like wondering like, what do you... I feel like it's so much more one-sided because a lot of times I feel like I have a lot less to contribute as far as knowledge goes. Like my knowledge is really just based around my upbringings and upcoming and stuff like that, and much less on education and stuff like that. So I guess my question would be like, what do you feel you get out of talking to me?
I think that you kind of brought up a good point in that, like, our conversations in the past and, like, just our friendship in general is kind of interesting because I don't necessarily think that we disagree on stuff, but I think we're interested in different things and are able to offer, like, something new to the other person. You know, I last year wouldn't have thought anything about things like automation
A
and
lot more of the
stuff.
technological stuff that
Yeah.
I'm interested in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that it keeps ideas and conversations interesting in that we agree on stuff, but it's not this back and forth, like, yeah, again, just echo chamber kind of thing, where I feel like most, maybe not all conversations of ours, but most of them end up having some development where they turn into something else or expand on a certain area, and they don't like sit and they're not like stagnant, you know.
Yeah, so I think that's a big defining feature between the two of us that makes us a good dynamic. I am much more interested in the technological side of things and how that affects things, and you have a lot more of like, I'm interested in it, but you have a lot more of the background of like socially how it works. And both of us are interested in political issues and how all three of those aspects really intertwine and connect to one another. This like triangle of social, economical, political, technological world we live in. Because in all seriousness, all the issues are intertwined.
Yeah.
And I think that's why our conversations are so good and it comes together so well. So, before we move into the next little bit, I want to give people a idea of like who we are as people a little bit more. So, if you could randomly pick out a piece of media or event in your life or anything really that you think contributed most, maybe not most, but very, very much to molding who you are today, like what would be something you could think of?
Yeah. In college, I was interested in environmentalism and well, I still am, I guess, but that kind of ignited my delving into politics a little bit more. And a prominent writer that I read starting in college was Edward Abbey, and Edward Abbey wrote nonfiction, but he wrote some fiction as well, just kind of dealing with environmental problems, particularly in the American West. And he was the main thing that really separated him from other writers for me was that he was a lot more of a radical thinker as far as environmental issues goes. He called himself an anarchist and was kind of the spark that created a lot of radical environmental movements. So I got interested in that at first, which kind of pushed me into getting interested in politics, especially like kind of radical. And when I say that, I mean like just kind of looking at the root of a problem, not necessarily like extremist, but radical is like just kind of trying to find the root of an issue. So that was the first step really, which led me to all sorts of other writers, but just really getting to the heart of an issue has been something that I've been interested in. What media or that kind of thing got you into?
Like we've definitely talked about it a lot, and it's the internet personality CGP Grey. Particularly the video that like changed my life and the way I looked at things, which is the YouTube video Humans Need Not Apply. It's just a video about automation and what it entails. And up until that point in my life, I've been interested in all these different issues as separate issues, whether it's political issues, societal issues, technological issues, or economy. Like, I've always been interested in all of the topics because I just am a person who's interested in how things work, but I've never thought about how they work together up until the point that I saw that video. And Gray did a great job of just presenting exactly like what's going on with it, what are the implications he thought about, what are the implications he thinks will come about from the technological advancements, and just added a whole deeper layer of thinking about a specific issue that I like never really considered earlier in my life. So from that video, automation being one of like my top most interests in topics to talk about and stuff like that. So more than just the topics of the video getting me really invested in that issue, that video itself like really radically changed the way I think about things, which led me into kind of the critical, like over analytical thinker I am now, that I look at like any work of media, whether it's like a work of art or article, and my brain automatically starts thinking about the implications it has, whether it's the implications of what the author or artist intended when they created it, or the implications of what it means as a society for that type of thing to come about. I'm actually, since I've been able to think about it beforehand, since I'm the one with these questions, that is exactly the single most important piece of media that molded me to be who I am today and what type of thinker I am now. Since this is like a prologue, like a history of us, I was like, I guess we should actually talk about how we ended up meeting and coming to this point in our life.
Yeah.
Do you want to take the lead on that?
Sure, yeah. So Tony and I met through working at a nonprofit organization that just does some work in our local community. And I remember talking about overpopulation and stuff like that with you. But yeah, and back then we were like driving around the city in a van, and I think there was one other person in the car who I don't remember.
Yeah. I don't remember who it is. We always creeped out people with all conversations.
Yeah. And it was kind of a thing at our work to go out every Thursday, or try to go out every Thursday for beers, and that would pretty often turn into Tony and I and like a couple other people being like the last ones hanging around. Like everyone else would go home and we'd be there for a few more hours still talking about something. And another thing was that you had gotten a flat tire on your car, so for a while we were carpooling to work together, and so we were able to have these conversations, even though I think it was like probably only 20 minutes or something every day, but still, like, we had a lot of conversations about different things.
Yeah, that was definitely the start of everything. It was just nice to meet someone else who, honestly, like again, tying it back to the podcast, it's the conversations like that made me realize, like, I mean, we've known each other for a little over a year now, and we still don't run out of topics to talk about. Like, the past month or so, we've met up every single week, and we just dive into a topic and is able to talk for like several hours straight about it. It's like conversations like that not made me realize, but much more reinforced my idea that, like, I don't know how much I've said this around you, but I say this a lot about how much I hate small talk.
Yeah.
But I definitely have this very concrete idea nowadays of, like, I hate small talk because there's no time for it. Like, there's no room for it. We can literally spend every day together all the time, and there's always going to be more issues that we could talk about. And it's not just like talking about, just complaining about it or whatever, but I do think like talking about it and diving into a further individual understanding of it helps us kind of talk to other people about it as well. The deeper of an understanding we have, the more we can kind of have deeper conversations with people, again, that's outside of us, that's like more or less educated on the issues.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a small start to a rippling effect of like trying to get at least more people that's engaged and understanding of the issues that really require attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always thought that it was pretty interesting because even in our conversations that centered around coworkers or some personal problem we were having, like it would end up veering into some larger discussion about something, you know, like
it's like, man, so and so ate my lunch today. It's like, that's why we have an overpopulation problem. It's like, wait, how do we jump to that?
Yeah, but I think that's kind of a neat and unique
dynamic.
Yeah, dynamic to our conversations.
Mm-hmm. Over the past few months of like having these deeper conversations, I think it was at one, I don't remember when, but just at one random point. I mean, we talked about it often, but at one random point it like really clicked with me, where I was like, yeah, obviously it's really nice for us to converse like this, and it like matters on a small scale. But the sad thing is, it's like, in reality, us two just talking in your basement, just hanging out, doesn't really help anything or really actually do anything.
Yeah.
And I think, like, it was, like, a day or two later was when it, like, randomly clicked, and I was like, yo, do you want to start a podcast with me? Yeah, originally, I think, at least for me in particular, originally it really came much more of, self-learning thing, like the whole bit we were talking about before, about all the positive influences for me, about like recording our personal growths and stuff like that. So between the time of the single conversation of, hey, do you want to start a podcast with me, till now, it's been exactly a week.
Yeah, was it last week that?
Was it Monday or Tuesday last week?
I think it was Monday, yeah.
Okay, so it's been a week and a day. And between that week and a day, I've been kind of like talking to some other friends about it, about like starting this podcast with my friend and stuff like that. And they were like, dude, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. And like a lot of it was just, yeah, like people say it's a good idea. But the more and more I talked about it and kind of hashed out the ideas and actually typed up show notes and like what the podcast meant, the podcast really grew and drew a meaning to me that I didn't really have before. When we originally said, hey, let's start a podcast, like I was perfectly content with the idea that like even if literally 0 listeners, I would still happily do it.
Mm-hmm.
And like that for me hasn't changed. Like even if nobody listens to me, I'd still happily keep doing this.
Yeah.
But over the past week and like telling it to other people and the feedback I got, it's made me actually really want people to listen, because I think something I wrote down that like was what popped into my head and was very like a big driving force to me was after we determined the title of Casual Conversations to podcast, because it's kind of has like several meanings. It's like casual conversations. It's casual conversations between me and Dylan. Like he was talking about earlier, these are just the conversations we have. Like we don't really care who's around, who else cares to listen, if it's like time and place appropriate, because none of that really ever mattered to me, at least. It was just that's what's normal to us, you know? These are the conversations between me and you.
Yeah.
Whereas I realize, like, that's much more of, like, a deeper conversation to other people. And we touch on a lot of... Yeah, I think it was one of the first few days we worked together when we talked about, like, overpopulation. And my views on that are kind of a little crazier than other people's. But it's silly that stuff like that is almost viewed as a taboo to talk about in casual conversation. People don't want to have conversations about deeper things or important political issues. Like, when you decide to bring up something about population, like overpopulation with other people, they look at you like you're that crazy uncle at Thanksgiving, like, oh, there's Uncle Bob again, like, going on this political rant. And I realize that that's just a negative thing. Those are conversations that are good to have regardless of if you agree on the issues or not. They're conversations that we need to grow a deeper understanding of. And to me, casual conversations, besides casual conversations between me and you or us and the audience we have, it's much more about hoping that we can kind of normalize conversations like this. To me, the other part I wanted to add in is the casual part is specifically about, like, how neither of us are really experts in the stuff we talk about, and yet we still are able to have a deeper conversation and come to an understanding of stuff like that. But the part that, like, drives it all together for me is I think right now the conversations we have would be considered, like, deeper conversations. And to me, they shouldn't be. I really want to normalize conversations like this to turn them into casual conversations.
Yeah.
So, it kind of... The title Casual Conversations kind of have a dual meaning of what we have and also what I want conversations like ours to become.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just over the past week, this single title, like the simple, like, 2 words that I literally just, on my way home, I was, like, making a turn and it popped into my head, and those single 2 words honestly just kind of mean so much to me now that it's really surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of, like, my views on where I stand with the podcast right now. Just, that's what it's come to mean to me after a week. And we haven't really touched base on that since we've just kind of thrown the idea out there. Has the idea of, like, having a podcast grown on you anyways? Or, like, what does the podcast mean to you now?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to you the other day about the title a little bit. Yeah, not necessarily what you just said, but I really agree with how you feel about normalizing those kinds of conversations and really getting people to start talking to each other a little bit more, and hopefully that'll spread.
Sometimes I definitely feel like I, like, dragged you into this because I'm like, hey, let's do it, and then, like, I've just been, like, putting in all this work and I'm like, read everything I wrote, like, to the brim. It's like, read all my crazy ideas and I'm like, you're coming with me on this journey whether you want to or not.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that's just kind of funny because I have read everything, but I, like, don't comment on it, and that's, like, I need to get better at that, but I like to just let things sit in. Plus, it's been, like, a busy week.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. But yeah.
But no, I mean, it's fine. Like, honestly, it's between all the different stuff I've been writing up kind of every single day at this point, I've, like, kind of realized that for certain things, like the ideas of the podcast, it would be fine, but honestly, like, stuff like that, I think I wanted to come out of a more, like, natural state, meaning, like, since I knew I wanted to do this episode 0, I wanted to give you the ideas of what I wanted to talk about, but I didn't want to have you write out speeches to answer every single question of mine.
Yeah.
Like, it seems far less genuine.
Yeah, and again, I think that just kind of goes against what I would want from this podcast. I don't want to personally be able to think out everything that I am going to say. Maybe, enough so that it's structured, but too much is just...
It pulls it too far away from a casual conversation. Like...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it turns into just us monologuing one after another, like, with the questions and speeches we've written down.
Live from Squeaky Basement.
Yeah, so I guess, I made a very big distinction between ideas and goals for the podcast, and one of them being, we've talked a lot about, like, your personal goals and whatnot, but do you have kind of ideas of where you want our audience to be or stuff like that? This imaginary audience we have? Or, like, what's the take-home you want to give to the audience?
Well, I think we kind of touched on it, just really sparking these conversations. And I think just with each other, but even just having people reply to the things that we say if they want to. Even things I've put up on my own Facebook and stuff have gotten replies from all sorts of people that I think is just kind of cool. It's, again, just really important to get out of our own views sometimes and hear what other people have to say and really try to take it in, because it's easy to just be like angry and they or whatever, they disagree with me in some way, but yeah.
I meant to touch on this earlier, but I totally forgot, and it ties into both my personal development and the, like, takeaway is I realized that it's very, like, I think a lot about the echo chamber and about how we end up. A lot of people think about echo chamber as a input thing instead of an output thing. We take in we reinforce our own ideas by reading articles that supports our ideas or listening to things that talk about things that support our ideas. And that's, like, one side of the echo chamber. And I think the other side of the echo chamber is the output side, which I don't think people talk about as much. Whether it's a silly comment on Facebook or arguing with someone online, I think people have an idea to build in an echo chamber regardless of if they want to or not, because it's very easy to accidentally alienate people that don't believe in the same thing as you.
Yeah.
Whether it's intentional because they said something you didn't like people online often, whether they intend to or not, use logical fallacies or just divert to name calling, and the second they start, you get offended, and then you start, like, doing the similar things back, like, you've automatically cut off that potential way to break out of your echo chamber. So I think it's, like, besides monitoring who we hear from and what we read and stuff like that, I think it's very important to and it's kind of on a much harder level, is to learn to talk to people that differ ideas from you without making them feel alienated, pushing them away, or, like, just making them feel bad about themselves. And I've, like, recently come to realize that I haven't been very good at that for the most part, and I think most people aren't, because it's very difficult to include people that can have polar opposite views of you. Like, I really, really hope we end up having an audience, and the community that I, like, want to build around casual conversations, I would hope is a very diverse community. as much as it's great to hear people backing us up, supporting us, like that. Well, we haven't even gotten to any actual issues yet. We've just been talking about us and the podcast.
Yeah.
But like,
you can't disagree with that.
Ha! You can't disagree that I want to have a podcast. But once we get to like some deeper issues, if people were to comment and tell us stuff that confirms our beliefs and could provide more information would be great. I mean, that's the whole reason like we talk to each other.
Yeah.
Is to provide more information. But honestly, like I want to be able to build an environment or a community that's not hostile to people who can definitely be just as educated, if not more educated about topics than us, who just happen to have differing views.
Yeah.
And I guess that's like what I'm really looking for in like what hopefully like what we can find and achieve. So let's close it out with just something to round everything up for you. Like what did you think about the things that like I asked you, and just round it all out nicely.
I mean, I think you and I both are just a lot less passionate about ourselves.
I was like, we both hate talking about ourselves in introductions. Like, we hate icebreakers, and this is an icebreaker episode.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's so gross.
So I think once we get into something that we're more passionate about or that is more interesting, it'll be a little more smooth.
Like, we're both just insignificant dusts in the universe. Like, why would anyone want to hear us talk for more than, like, 2 minutes about ourselves?
Don't even tune into any more of what we have to say.
Just skip episode 0. Like, episode 0 is what you listen to when, like, you're bored, and you're like, I mean, they're kind of cool. Like, I guess I want to know about them. I'll tune into episode 0. Like, honestly, just start from episode 1. Tell them, leave this right at the end so they actually can't not hear it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess, so, yeah, this would be just an episode about me and you both being awkward, not wanting to talk about ourselves.
Yeah.
But I guess, like, my takeaway is it's like, I guess, like, what you guys could expect to hear from us is, between the two of us, it's just deeper conversations in general. We're gonna try to keep this show about the things that I listed before, about like social, political, economical, technological issues and how they all tie in together, really, or how we view it all ties in together, at least. And we're just really pushing to normalize casual conversations. Any feedback on anything really would be amazing, because honestly that's part of the conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ding. But yeah, we're just starting out at this, so we're both trying to grow as individuals and as a show, and so all feedback is welcomed. I guess my end goal for this podcast would be if we end up like sparking even like one conversation that ends up educating someone on an issue, or just helping them be more passionate about it, or just deepening the understanding of it, regardless of if it's through us talking or if it's like someone who listens who talks about it with someone else. Even indirectly, like, I would consider this a success for me personally. Mm-hmm. And that would be great for me. I guess to give an example of what topics to expect from us would be talk about the Knicks what's probably gonna be the next episode. Like, I say, like, I wouldn't hold anything I say accountable because I'm really wishy-washy as a person. But as of right now, I have down in the show notes, I gave the episode a title of 45 to Life. I think you know what that means, but I also didn't put in any notes of what I meant by that. So
I'm not sure.
But that's a title that I decided to run with just as kind of the overview episodes of life in the past about month now under the new administration. And 45 to Life sounds a little grim because our views are a little grim.
Yeah.
It parallels kind of nicely, and maybe I'll end up being able to write show notes that ties into that idea even more. But do you have a little outro? Like, say goodbye to the audience? Sign out?
Yeah, just find us on MySpace, like us on Twitter.
Hit us up on Club Penguin.
Oh, jeez.
If you look, we're gonna be in RuneScape. We're
Yeah.
gonna be in the Wildies.
Yeah.
And with that, yeah, you could find me in all the same places, pretty much. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys liked our little episode 0 and our kind of prologue into our actual podcast. And hope you guys stick around. Thanks. For now, you could listen to us on SoundCloud and YouTube, and reach us on Facebook and through our email account at casualconversationsthepodcast@gmail.com.